Well, it's 12 o'clock. I don't know if anyone is joining us here. I don't expect a lot of people to be on, mainly because, we knew out the starting gates and, we'll see how it goes. But I've got to say, it's been a very, very, very exciting and controversial week for us here in South Africa in terms of the political landscape, and particularly in terms of our relationship with primarily the United States of America. But I'm sure that's going to filter through to other westernized first world countries, and we'll see how that goes. But that got me to thinking about our situation in terms of what we deal with here, which is obviously the addiction issue in South Africa. And, I see a lot of parameters and what's the word I'm looking for? I can't find the word now in my mind, but things that are the same between what has happened between South Africa and America primarily, and what we deal with here, addiction. And I explained it to a couple of people on social media, and I did a lesson on it this morning in our devotion after an incident with an individual who is just absolutely not committed to the process of his own recovery. And that's why I entitled this video, what are we trying to accomplish here? What are we trying to do here? So, as I stated in my previous video, I'm a South African. I'm a proud South African. I'm especially proud when I see our teams and our athletes accomplish phenomenal things on the sport field. And, I'm especially proud when I drive, or like I like to do, as you can see here, KDM. I'm an avid motorcyclist, particularly off-road and adventure motorcycles. So I travel a lot into what the Australians would call the outback of Australia, but here in South Africa, which is out into our countryside, into our mountains and along our coasts, and through our mealie lands and through our deserts like the Karoo. And when I see these places, I become really proud of this country and what we have. I become especially proud when I go through different areas and I meet different people from different tribes and different backgrounds in our country. And I also become sad when I see the challenges that people face every single day. And when I see what we're dealing with here with addiction, I become exceptionally sad, and I lose my pride for my country. And when I see what's going on between our country and the world stage, I become sad and disappointed, and I start wondering about how this is going to affect, the people of this country, and how it's going to affect, what we deal with here on a daily basis, which is the, people who are at the lowest of the low of the low of their lives. And it's truly terrifying. And you start thinking, well, what are we working for? What are we working towards? We have an immense faith in God, and we trust God. And the reason we do that is because of what we've seen God accomplish in our lives, myself and my wife and the people that work here, in terms of where we come from and where we've arrived at, and hopefully where we're still going. So, it is what it is, but what are we trying to accomplish? And I drew a parallel between what has happened between South Africa and America and what we deal with here every day. So in terms of what we accomplish, we base our entire ministry on a couple of key scriptures. And one of those key scriptures is Deuteronomy 30:19, where God says, I call heaven and earth as witness against you today, that I set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both you and your descendants may live. And that's what we're trying to accomplish here. We're trying to bring people to a place of understanding that, that they've been living in death, and that there's a life of life and light available to them. Now, when you look at addiction, you'll see a lot of things that, ring a bell when you look at this whole situation between America and South Africa. So, because that's in the news, I'm going to use that as a platform to base, what we are trying to accomplish and what we do. So we live in a country that has become reliant upon foreign aid to assist millions of people in this country that are lacking access to certain, in this case, I guess, medical treatments, and in a lot of cases, basic human needs such as food and clean water and all of that. Now, the reason that we don't have these things for these people is not due to the fact that the country itself has a lack of resources. The country has multiple resources and is in fact a very wealthy country when you look at what is available in terms of what the potential is of growing things, producing things, and of course our mining sector and mineral sector. So when you look at it in contrast to the addicted person has become dependent outside of the drugs. We're not even going to talk about the drugs, but the addicted person has become addicted to the enablement through constant donations into their poor performance from their family. So you would say then the addict would represent South Africa in this case, and the parents would represent the United States. And what we deal with and what we see is this, is that the addict will use the money that is given to spend on frivolous and damaging and destructive behaviors and lifestyles, i.e. their life of drug abuse. And the addict will make all kinds of excuses, and some of the excuses might even be justified. There are people that have gone through some terrible things in their lives that end up in addiction due to this need to not face those problems and hide from those problems, and then choose to go the way of drugs and drug abuse to mask and cover those problems. And we have the same situation with South Africa. South Africa has a number of excuses why they are failing and why we are failing, particularly the government of this country, which is, apartheid and colonization and the wrongs of the past and all these types of excuses / reasons that the government has been giving the people of this country for the people of this country for its failure to run the country correctly. And this is the same as addiction. The addicts will blame their parents, the addicts will blame the same government, the addicts will blame the lack of opportunities, the addicts will blame anything that they can blame in order to not take responsibility for using the opportunities that they've been given correctly and squandering those opportunities on feeding their own deceitful desires. And that is exactly what has happened in South Africa. Now it gets worse. Not only will the addict do that, but the addict will then go and slate and slander and belittle and just attack the very people that are providing them with the money that they need to stay alive, the medical services they need to stay alive, the roof over their heads, they will abuse their own family just like the citizens of this country are abused on a daily basis, you know? And then ultimately what happens is that the family will get to a place where they say, look, we are not providing any further sustenance and input into this individual anymore, because the money that we put in is going nowhere. And it's money that we could use to empower other members of our family. And that's exactly what America's done. America has looked at what they're spending here versus what the actual outcomes are, all right, while being attacked and belittled and slandered and continually berated by the politicians of this country, and have decided that, you know, what we're rather going to do is that the money that is paid into our tax funds by our auto workers, our union workers, our street cleaners, our corporations, our government employees, our coal miners, our oil field workers, our troops around the world, whatever those people are paying into the tax fund, we feel we are rather going to take that money and distribute it back to those people who are working for that money and paying into the welfare of the United States of America, rather than give it to our black sheep of the family, you know, excuse the pun, it's not intended, you know, just give money willy-nilly to a country that is wasting the money, and wasting the money on their own personal destructive patterns. It's addiction 101. So for me, as an addiction specialist, I look at what is America has done, and I transfer it back to what I do, and I say, well, in my mind, that makes perfect sense, because that is exactly what we preach to our parents and families of people that are addicted to drugs. We teach them, cut the ties of codependence, cut the ties of permanent self-flagellation and guilt, cut the ties and allow this individual to start understanding the impact that his poor decisions are making upon him, as well as his society at large and the people around him. Allow this individual to either sink or swim. Because it's once an addict starts understanding that he cannot continually behave in the pattern and manner that he's been behaving, while expecting continual and unwavering support from people who are constantly seeing no results from what they're putting into this individual's life. My pastor, when I was recovering, he said it like this. He said, the relationship between an addict and a family is like a person sitting at a one-armed bandit in a casino, constantly, rand after rand, 10 rand after 10 rand, 20 rand after 20 rand, 100 rand after 100 rand, 200, spending thousands upon thousands upon thousands of rands, putting it into this machine, pulling the lever, no result, put it into the machine, pull the lever, no result, waiting year upon year upon year for a result, for a jackpot, you know, and even being fueled into waiting for that jackpot because seeing other people that are getting jackpots from their machines and never getting it. And then ultimately just walking away from the machine completely disappointed and broke and destroyed. And that made so much sense to me when I was going through my recovery process. And it's something that I teach here. And, you know, I look at this whole thing and I go, well, this is exactly what we are trying to do. This is what we are trying to accomplish. You know, South Africa has become, and I'm not trying to insult my own country. I love this country. I love the people of this country. But in terms of drug addiction, we've become a cesspool, an absolute and total and utter cesspool. And we look at certain initiatives that are created by the government to try and stem the tide of addiction in this country, which are completely ineffectual. Completely ineffectual. If they were effectual, we would have seen some kind of long-term permanent result from the projects and policies that they've implemented. You know, they're so trapped in bureaucracy and law and legality that they completely miss the entire point of what we're trying to do here, which is the recovery of individual by individual by individual by individual. And they refuse to acknowledge basic things that are required to recover and rehabilitate an addict. The primary things that are required to recover an addict is the understanding of the self. And we believe that you cannot understand the self without an understanding of God, the creator of the self. And thus we instill this in what we do here. We try to build a platform of spirituality where a person can receive a measure of self-esteem which is degraded through the lifestyles that these people live. We try and reintroduce that self-esteem by making them understand that they created for a purpose, they created for a reason, and they created to live a life of productivity and growth. Biblically, that is what the Bible teaches us. And we teach them that if you don't have a spiritual platform, a solid platform to understand who you are, why you are, you can't build anything on that. I was taught, and it's a cliche that I learned somewhere, I don't know where, but it says this: if you stand for nothing, you will fall for everything. And we deal mainly with men, or only with men here. And I look at these men that arrive here, and there's a lot of things that contribute to these men, but they arrive in here as males. Males. They don't understand. They don't know what is required of them to be men, what their duties are as men, what their responsibilities are as men, what their purpose is as men. They've never been taught these things. And I, in a great way, blame this quick fix. If it doesn't work, we just get a divorce mindset that we have around the world. I blame the fact that there's a culture in South Africa of fatherlessness. You know, we have men here constantly bragging about how many children they have. And when we ask them, well, how many do you look after? The room falls silent. Men in this country believe that impregnating a woman makes you a man. Men in this country don't understand that it's raising the child and teaching the child to be a responsible, well-rounded individual that makes you a man. Men in this country don't understand that it takes two parents, as well as sometimes a village, and as well as grandparents and so on, to raise a child. They don't get it. The fact that they've impregnated the woman and that a child is born, they're a man. They don't provide for that child. They don't provide housing for that child. They don't provide education for that child. They provide nothing for the child, but they claim to have a child. These are the types of people that come here. We have people coming here over and over that are so trapped in toxic living within their own households. I had a 50-year-old man who was still living with his 80-year-old mother. And the 80-year-old mother says to him, well, he'll always be my child and I must provide a home for him. That is completely wrong. Absolutely and totally wrong. You've robbed that man of his life as a man. You've robbed him of his life as a man in order to be this permanent, nurturing and worried person in terms of empty nest syndrome. You know? And these people come here. So what we try to accomplish is to build a spiritual platform upon which we start building pillars of recovery. We build pillars of responsibility, understanding that your life is your own responsibility. You know, we all have bad things that happen to us in life, all of us. Bad things come without asking. Bad things happen to good people, but you got to deal with those things and take responsibility for how you deal with those things. No matter what comes your way, you have a choice on how to deal with it. I know this through the innumerable failures that I've been involved in, through my poor choices, poor affiliations to people that don't have my best interests at heart, who, I go in hammer and tongs, whose only entire mission has been to either milk me or actually go all out to destroy me. But I learn from it. I get hurt. I take responsibility for my role in a specific relationship or deal or whatever it was that I was involved in. And, I note it down in my mind, and I make a conscious decision to make a better decision going forward. And because of these poor decisions, I've got a track record that doesn't look that fantastic. It doesn't look that fantastic to the outsider. But to me, it's a fantastic track record, because it's a track record of lessons learned, and it's a track record of taking responsibility for my own actions and taking responsibility for my own life. Another pillar that we introduce on the spiritual platform is routine living. Routine living. Life exists out of routine living. Human beings thrive on routine. It's a very simple and known fact of life. So we try and reinstall routine. Lying. Remove the lying. Remove the manipulative behavior. And this is the big one. And this is where I come back to the South Africa USA thing. And this is what I'm trying to teach my guys on a daily basis. And they hate me for it. I ask them, why are you in rehab? Why are you here? What are you trying to accomplish? And because they've been here for a while, or they've been to the other recovery centers, we get the standard answer: I'm trying to improve or change my life. And when I start delving into that, well, how do you want to improve or change your life? The answers that I get are really so far gone. They present a completely different reality to what the realities of the real world and life are. And I personally think that South Africa, like the addict, is out of touch with what the real world and how the real world operates. In South Africa, people in this country have become so dependent upon the government and so dependent upon the excuse of apartheid and previous injustice that they're unable to create their own lives. They're absolutely unable to create their own lives, because in their minds, they believe that they're entitled to all these things because of things that happened to them 300 years ago, or as recently as 50 years ago, when the National Party was in power, 100 years ago almost. And because of these things that happened to them in the past, they're just entitled to receive and be dependent. But like I try and explain to these guys, you can go and sit at home and be dependent upon your family and trust in handouts. Excuse me, I've still got a bit of the old remnants of the flu here. You can choose to be dependent upon that stuff. But the problem comes with dependence, in that when the people that you're dependent upon insist that you participate in certain things, or their dependence will be removed, and because you've created no independence, you then have to buckle to what they say and what their will is. Because if you don't, you're not going to receive the stuff that you're dependent upon. And this is South Africa in a nutshell. South Africa, during the National Party rule under apartheid, ultimately, at the end of the whole thing, was also forced into submission, because we are dependent upon foreign trade in order to sustain our economy and in order to sustain our government and in order to make sure that there's fuel and all these types of things that are required, because we don't have oil. These are why big industries, parastatals like Sasol and Mosgas were started, so that South Africa could separate itself and become independent on its fuel needs. But having said that, at the same time, South Africa was fighting a war in Angola, Southwest Africa, that was taking an immense toll on the economy. And as such, we were highly dependent on trade and investment from foreign countries. But we built our own things. We built Eskom, we built all these types of parastatal companies, ISCOR, the now Armscor, the South African Railways, and so on and so forth, which were highly effective entities. And we were pretty independent, and that is what allowed the racism and the apartheid system to last as long as it did, because the then government understood that they had to be independent from the rest of the world if they wanted to sustain this political agenda. But then, of course, sanctions arrived and the world ganged up against South Africa, rightly so, I agree, and forced them into submission through sanctions and such like. Now, a different government took over. A government took over that hadn't built any of those things. The people on the ground had built it, absolutely. Through the workforce that was provided through apartheid, these things were built. We can't get around it. But they were built. They absolutely were built. And they worked. And the government that took it over never built it. So they didn't understand what it took to become independent. And thus, they became dependent upon the legacy of the people they hated the most, the apartheid regime. And not only did they become dependent upon it, they went out of their way to destroy all of it. And as they destroyed all these things, they found that money was becoming a scarcity and the South African economy was weakening and getting weaker and weaker. And people were becoming more and more. And they needed more and more money to line their own pockets and also to try and keep afloat a bare skeleton facade of what there was before. And so they started traveling around the world and becoming like the rest of the African countries that stand at the World Economic Forum and at the financial counters of the Western world, and became dependent upon the handouts that came from these countries. And while they started living off these handouts and being dependent upon it and being dependent on a vast minority of taxpayers in this country, the system collapsed. Everything started collapsing. Everything started falling apart. And then what happened is they started blaming the people that they were dependent upon for the collapse, instead of understanding that it was their own dependence that created the collapse. And that is an addict 100%. 100%. A man who blames everybody for his collapse due to his own dependence. So what are we trying to do here? What are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to build men here, real men, so that these men can go out and join the workforce and become independent. And by becoming independent, can become independent not only of their families, but independent of this government, and build their own thing and build their own life. And so that they can transfer that recovery to this nation, and so that this nation can start understanding that even if you are owed anything because of previous injustice, there's nothing left to give. There's nothing left to give. Now, the last of it is going to be this land story. We've taken everything else. We've destroyed the infrastructure. We've destroyed the industry. We've destroyed our economic future. We've destroyed our ties with our trade partners. Like addicts do. They destroy relationships. They destroy whatever is given to them. They sell it, they pawn it, they give it away. And now what are we going to do? There's nothing left to give. The only thing left is the ground under our feet. And now we're going to take the ground under our feet and we're going to try to pawn that off at 1 cent on the dollar by giving it to people that can do nothing with it. Literally. And that's the addict mindset. So it's my firm belief, I believe this, that the addict mentality has permeated into our culture, or our culture has permeated into the addict mentality, but the thinking is the same. We don't want to build anything, we don't want to work, but we want to receive constantly. And while we're receiving, we want to accuse, discredit, and attack those that we're receiving from. And then we get upset when they stop giving it to us. So we're trying to accomplish spiritually grounded men who can become independent, who can take responsibility for their lives, who work in a routine, and who can help us build this country to what it truly can be. And that's what I'm trying to accomplish. That's it. End of story. And I will support whoever supports that thinking. But I'm definitely not going to sit idly aside and watch a bunch of addicts destroy my home that I spent years and years and years building. I'm certainly not going to give everything I earned and worked for to a bunch of addicts to go and give to drug dealers. You know what I'm saying? And that's it. That's what we're trying to accomplish. I hope you found benefit in this. And I'm sorry I didn't do one yesterday, but unfortunately I was down with this flu. Been down sort of since last week Thursday. I took a chance and got on my bike on Saturday, but that was a bad move. I got even more sick. But yeah, that's it. And I hope you found benefit in it. God bless. See you guys soon. Cheers.